Rebirth has been mentioned a few times now. What exactly is rebirth in Buddhism if there is no belief of any permanence in humans? This is the most commonly asked question in Buddhism. All the retreats I've ever been to, all the online forums I've ever been on, everybody asks this. Essentially the question is, if there's no permanent self, then what gets reborn? That's the question. And the answer is that, so at the time of the Buddha, there was this belief of, actually even today in Hinduism, there's this belief of the Atman. This is like an eternal soul. Actually, it's described as like a little being that like resides inside of you. And when you go to sleep, it goes away, or when you die, it goes away, and it's an eternal being. So the Buddha basically, which is one of the reasons why he was a radical at the time, he said, no, there's nothing that's eternal. Absolutely nothing. If everything is impermanent, there can't be this permanent soul, this permanent being that exists. And so naturally, then people say, well, then how does rebirth work? And the answer is that you view the Buddha said that whatever you think of, whatever you can look at in your experience, you can't find a self in that experience. And he uses what's called the 5 aggregates. Form. So form, the body, things, internally and externally. So feeling, pleasant, painful, neutral feeling. Perception. When you have contact with your eyes, your senses have contact with something, an object, a smell, a taste. You have a perception of that. That is this. That is that. Form, feeling, perception. Then we have intentions, mental intentions, bodily, verbal, and mental intentions. And then we have consciousness. And the Buddha says there's nothing other than that. So essentially, what would be reborn, what would be going to the next existence is these processes, right? Everything is conditioned in existence, meaning that it comes together from processes. It comes together from causes, and it stays for a time, right? Things arise, they persist with alteration. What that means is you look at ourselves. Everybody's an adult here, right? When we first came into this world, we were like this. Now we're like this. We're still here, but we're changing. Everything's always changing. And then things cease. It's this cycle, like that. So when you see that, when you understand, and in the practice, when you start to realize and start to understand that what you thought was you is, you can't see a you in it anymore, then that is when you start to understand what this self is. So, that's the best answer I'm going to give. The Buddha doesn't go into a lot of detail about lots of metaphysics. As a matter of fact, people ask him all these questions. You read the sutras, people are always asking him all these questions. Is the world finite or infinite? Is what is it? Is there a self? Isn't there a self? And he's always redirecting people to suffering and practicing. Always redirecting, because we can get really lost in. And so I've found, as a Westerner myself, and now being more involved with people who are coming to Buddhism, and that's where I found people get so hung up on stuff like rebirth, right, and stuff like karma and these kind of things. And what I found is that even there's nothing in Buddhism that says you're forced to believe anything. What the Buddha does say is that as you follow this practice and you develop right view, you understand these things. And so like I'm a Buddhist monk. I can't say 100% that I believe in rebirth because I don't have that experience for myself. And that's okay. Could you imagine like a priest saying, well, I'm not quite sure I believe in God. That wouldn't work out. So, don't get too hung up on that stuff. Just practice. Whatever, be open-minded about things and be able to shelve it. If you don't understand or if that is something that you don't believe in or whatever, then put it aside. Just continue the practice. There's a section in the suttas where the Buddha, people ask this. Again, people think that like ancient people were like stupid, or they all believed in like mystical fairies in the sky and all these kind of things. But we really discredit our ancestors because they're just as smart as us. In the Buddha's time, there's many people going around, many teachers, and they taught all kinds of stuff: materialism, nihilism, eternalism, souls and or monotheism, polytheism, all of that stuff. You read the suttas, you see the Buddha and the Buddhists at the time are coming into contact with all of these beliefs, and people are confused. And he goes to this one city, and the people are like, everybody comes, and then they spout their belief, and then they denounce everybody else, and then they leave. Who do we know who to believe? And the Buddha basically leads them through examining for themselves. It's an amazing sutta. But one of the things that he says that somebody who does this practice has 4 assurances here and now. The first one is, if there is such a thing as rebirth, if there isn't such a thing as rebirth, if there's nothing after your life, doing this practice leads you to peace, happiness, and living content and happily among people here in this very life. If there is something after, then you're doubly rewarded. And the same thing, the other thing is, some people believe that your actions didn't matter. That they preach that you can do whatever, you can going around killing people, doesn't mean anything. There's no fruit of that, there's nothing. Your actions don't matter. And Buddha was not too happy with that. He didn't like that one bit. And so, the other aspect is, if there is no fruit of your actions, well, doing good and living a good life is still beneficial to you and other people in this life, whether there's something after or not. So, best thing to do is practice. Keep an open mind, practice, and if something's too complicated, getting you too riled up intellectually, shelve it. Watch what's going on with your breath and your mind.